Welcome everybody to our webinar today, to the Transformation Blueprint. I'm Ryan Prescott, the COO of Palladin Technologies. Joining me today is Nicole McNamara. Uh, and she'll tell you about her background, but Nicole's an amazing digital transformation leader that we've been excited to partner with at Palladin, who's now the CEO of Catalyst, and is helping customers across the ecosystem, across the market, do incredible things with digital transformation and helping to understand their market opportunity. For those that don't know, Paladin is a Summit Salesforce partner based in Atlanta, Georgia. We work across a couple key industries, mostly telecom, high tech, and media. But we have an incredible team that's helping us explore new industries as well that we're looking into. And we are an Inc. 5000 winner, and just excited to be here today to talk with Nicole a little bit about digital transformation, the do's, the don'ts, the gotchas, the here's the really easy ways you can mess this up, which I think Nicole's going to educate us on. But on that note, Nicole, I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, there's a lot of those easy ways that we can mess it up. Very small, very easy to do. Awesome. Well, thank you, Ryan, and thanks everybody for joining. I recognize that, you know, 1 o'clock on a Thursday. Do we have any West Coasters here? No, all Easty? Okay. Is a busy time of day and everyone's calendars are crazy, so we're glad you're here. We're probably not going to spend an entire hour doing this, but I do want to make sure we have time for Q&A. If you have questions in the meantime, as I'm going through any of this, you can drop it into the chat. You can come off of mute. We're pretty flexible here today. All right, so if you haven't already met me, I know a lot of people on this call, so apologies if you already know this stuff about me. I'm Nicole McNamara. I've had an interesting background. As I was working on the slide, I thought, geez, it is all over the map. And what I realized is that the thing that is the through line is making strategy human, evoking emotions, and driving impact. Most recently, as I think Ryan mentioned, I was the head of our global innovation consulting team at Salesforce. You can't see it exactly there, but that little magazine there was an article that Fortune wrote about my team. Jason, who's on the call with us today, was on the team, and a bunch of you from Salesforce or previous to Salesforce know about us. We were the team that built strategies and transformation roadmaps for Salesforce's most important clients. Today, I'm lucky to be the founder and CEO of a company called Catalyst. We do the same thing as we did at Salesforce, only we're not, kind of just beholden to the Salesforce platform. We work across platforms depending on what the needs are. You see down here the Velvet Hammer. That's what my team has always called me. I hope Jason is giggling when he reads this. And I think that's because I'm kind of known for being kind enough to drive trust, but tough enough to drive results. So I always thought that was an endearing title, and I've stuck with it since. So super excited to take you guys through this today. My team worked with some of the biggest brands that you've ever heard of and ever had experiences with. If you've ever opened the Marriott Bonvoy app, you can thank the Ignite team at Salesforce. If you've ever had your windshield replaced at Safelite and thought, oh, there's my driver, you could thank our team as well. But one of the things that we saw again and again and again was trouble getting transformation done. And this applied to enterprises, it applied to mid-market companies, it applied to startups. Has anyone ever seen this picture over here?
I think it's safe to say, Nicole, that's probably how our team feels on a day in, day out basis. So
Well, it's sometimes I look at this and I think about like what kind of day I'm having and who do I feel like. And my personal one is the sales executive describing they need, this is going to work and everything's going to be perfect. And you don't need to do anything because it's just going to be the comfiest, shiniest thing you've ever seen. And we know that this is really hard work. Transformation is just difficult. And so my team really helps companies mitigate some of this. You're never going to run a perfect transformation. It doesn't happen. But there are some tried and trusted realities that can help you kind of mitigate the disaster. And those are things like alignment, vision setting, sponsorship, governance, user design. We're going to talk about some of those things today, but what we really want to talk about today is how to mitigate this. So this, I'm sure if anybody spends any time in transformation, you've all heard these horror stories, right? 70% of transformations are not delivering results, which on the upside means 30% are, which is an increase a little bit from over the past couple of years. 84% of digital transformations, and I call out digital for a specific reason because most of us on this call are in tech, but they fail. They fail to deliver on the value that they were sold for. And it is an expensive, expensive problem that is lining the pockets of very big companies. There's kind of five big ones that you might know of, and they are banking well off of this, right? $1.3 trillion is spent on transformation project. Like that's just an incredible amount of money for things that aren't working. And then, unless you were, on vacation the past couple weeks, there's this report about, from MIT saying that 95% of enterprise AI is failing. So we failed in transformation. We are failing in digital transformation, and AI is actually just making it worse. So we're talking about something that is fraught with problems and road bumps along the way. And so what we want to talk about today are what are the things that we know to be true in the ones that are in that 30%? And over the 10 years I was at Salesforce, our organization worked on just over 400 massive transformations. We did a bunch of smaller things as well. But when I think about like the big, big transformations, it was 400, over 400. And when we looked at them in aggregate, we were like, why are these ones working and others aren't? And when we looked at these and when we came up with what we're about to present to you, we found that it didn't matter the size of the company that was doing it if they followed these kinds of things. And actually, we didn't write these. We aggregated them up because we were like, there's something working here, and we wanted to make sure we understood it so that we could help other companies not avoid not, or avoid the pitfalls. So 10 years ago, companies used to say to me, Nicole, how do we digitally transform? And that made sense, right? Salesforce, CRM, customer experience, those things were relatively new. The idea I had CEOs say to me, I could barely spell CRM, let alone tell you what it's doing for my business. But as the world has come along, as companies are starting to, think about the middle and front office as much as they were thinking about the back office, the question is no longer how do we digitally transform, it's how do we successfully transform? And that's an important distinction because many of the problems in digital transformation didn't have to do with the tech. They had to do with people and processes that weren't built to optimize the technology, which, as Ryan and most of the people at Palladin can tell you, can pretty much do whatever you need it to if you design it correctly. And that's a huge if. So, how do you get started and where do we, start? Where do we like begin here? I call this slide the meeting before the meeting. And this is something that we used to do quite a bit at Salesforce, which was, can we just have an honest conversation about where we are today and what we're trying to do? And we bucketed them into a continuum, fixing or future proofing. Fixing being kind of like, there's a couple things here. I need to tighten them up. I've got to fix the basics. This is where IT spends a lot of their time on the fix side, right? Something's broken. There's a widget. Someone needs a laptop. But that's an existing infrastructure or IT situation. On the other side, future proofing. These are new innovations, really thinking through how do we bring new experiences to people and create net new value. And most of the innovation teams, the strategy houses, they sit on that side. And in the middle here is kind of everybody else. And these are the people that are like, hey, I just want to stop leaking value, right? So if you think about sales teams that you work with, for instance, you hear a lot of that. Like, I just want to be able to see the information about my customer when I need to be able to see it so that I don't have, I'm sure, do we have any salespeople on the call? Anybody? That thing about, oh, well, I just ran into so and so at the same client meeting that I was going into, and we ran into each other coming out of the elevator, and we ran into each other in the lobby. That's what we're trying to avoid, right? Stop leaking value and, in a great world, surprise and delight our customers. So the idea then is like, how do we move from fixing to future proofing as an organization and bring the teams associated with those buckets together? So when we looked across the 400 plus customers that we worked on and we aggregated out what's making this work versus not, we came up with four forces, we call them. And I'm going to go through them individually, so don't get too hung up here. But there's a reason why they're in a circle. First one is what we call experience as the operating system. Second, right role, excuse me, right data, right role. Third, technology stack, connected, preferably, which I'm sure all of you have spent a lot of time thinking about. And then fourth, listen, learn, and repeat. Now, before I get into the four of them, you're going to have a little message from me, our sponsor. This is perhaps the most important thing that I want you to hear. Each discipline that I'm about to go through is dependent on the one before it for its success. Because you could take this presentation to your IT team and they're going to zone in on connected tech stack. And they're going to feel really great about that if it's done. But if they look at it in isolation, they're not going to understand that you need steps one and steps two in order to get that done. There is no way we're talking about listening, learning, and repeating unless the three things that come before it are done as well. Number two, I'm about to make it sound super easy, but it is really difficult. I don't think that's surprising to anybody on this call, but it bears repeating. None of this works unless the whole line of business that is taking on a transformation or the whole organization understands it. If you have, especially at the top, if you have a C-suite that doesn't align to this idea and doesn't understand what we're talking about, the idea that it is going to be successful is going to diminish rapidly. Everybody across sales, service, marketing, legal, C-suite, even sometimes the board needs to understand these concepts in order for it to be successful. And last but not least, and I hope Jason is going to laugh when he reads this, if you find yourself saying, "We did it, we're done," and high-fiving, please refer back to number two. Transformation is never done. That is the reason why it's in a circle. Because every time you get a little bit better, you should create a new experience that starts the cycle again. We're going to talk about that in a minute. All right, are you with me? Do you want to get into the four things? All right. So, number one, experience is the operating system. So, I want you guys to think about a company that you have worked at where you have done a process and you have found yourself thinking, why do we do this? Why is this part of my daily job? Does anyone have a moment like that in their career? Thank you, Ryan. I see yours. Thank you, Logan. Okay. T, right. Jeffrey Jones, we haven't heard from you. Jeffrey, tell us about a process that isn't built in a way in which you think makes any sense.
For my current company or for the products I
Whenever,
help me?
wherever.
Okay, so one of the things that I see in one of the products that I sell is there are very inefficient ad operations set in that. And ad operations, particularly in media, is where the money is made. And so the
Yeah.
process is just what's been set up is very inefficient.
hmm Yeah. And that's because that process was built to sell a product,
Yes.
not to optimize on the humans. Now, it's really easy to talk about customer experience, and everybody loves the idea because then we can dream and we can think as humans. And what I see happening all the time is companies that are over optimizing on customer experiences and forgetting about their employees. So when we talk about experience as the operating system, these two things have to move like this. Employee and customer experience have to move in tandem with one another. If you over engineer a customer experience and don't take into consider the employee experience, you have the situation that Cummins found themselves in, which is really happy customers. Wow, this is so easy. And a bunch of employees who were like, I don't know where this data is, and it took me days to find it, and I was able to serve it up beautifully, but the back end systems for me to deliver that were really, really, really difficult. So we want to make sure that we are talking about the employee experience and the customer experience because nobody wants to just buy a product anymore, right? Like that idea that like I have a really great product and I'm just going to sell it to you and then, you're not going to have to worry about servicing it. I'm never going to recontact you so that we can upsell you later. Like those days are gone. And so when we talk about the idea of lifetime value, it flies in the face of how most business processes have been constructed. Let's think about a few examples where it's going well. So Marriott, which is a little bit, self-serving because we did help build some of the Marriott app. But if you think about your experience as a customer when you are at Marriott and your ability to chat or your ability to ask for additional pillows or your ability to order room service, that's a great customer experience for you. But if that came into a system on the back end for Marriott that was disconnected and broken, then all of a sudden we're making it hard for them. The beauty of the Bonvoy app is that it sits in the middle of those experiences. But let me tell you, that was hard work for them to do because that means they have to re-architect everything, right? If you think about room service has done their process the same way since, Bill Marriott had a root beer stand in Washington, D.C. They had to completely reimagine what a process would look like for them that optimized on the customer. Stitch Fix is another one. It's mostly for the ladies. Any of the ladies use Stitch Fix on this call?
I have before.
Yeah. So your experience was good, bad?
Yeah, no, I thought it was great.
Yeah. Well, Stitch Fix is one of those companies that started with the customer in mind, built that lifetime value, and then did the employee afterwards, right? So Stitch Fix, for the gentleman on the call who may not be aware of it, it's, kind of styling as a service. And so what they did was they said, hey, we have a challenge here. Can we have a subscription to sell to women and give them style through the mail without them having to leave their house? On the back end, they were collecting so much data that they were able to do a ton of other things outside of their core functionality. But again, that's where the business processes started. This is really, really hard work for big enterprises. Really hard work because these companies have been built off of these processes for years. And so to have a conversation about, well, that process may have made sense when we were selling a widget, but don't make sense when we're now selling value, is really, really difficult to have. And it is the first step, has to be the first step. All right. Second step, right data, right role. So has anyone ever called an 800 number for a service on something that you've bought and you get transferred 3 times? It actually happened to me recently. Uh, and every time I got transferred, I had to say the same thing over and over and over again. And it was like, I don't understand. Are you not transferring this information? Don't you have access to the fact that this is what I bought, this is when I bought it, this is what my current problem is? And the answer was no, right? So this is how do you stop exactly that problem? And back to the first thing that we were just talking about, most companies are not built for marketing and sales and service and all the support functions to have the right data at their fingertips for the problem that they're trying to solve. They are often just kind of looking at the data that is available to them in their tiny little silo. And we know that that doesn't lead to a great outcome because once you've bought a product, there's a sale or there's a service experience that's happening. That means that you need to care equally about attraction for marketing and awareness as you do about conversion inside sales, as you do about happy customers on the service end. But that requires a big shift and it requires you to have your data set up so that your lens for whatever it is you care about the most has the same set of data. So if Ryan and I are having a conversation and I work in service and Ryan works in sales, we need to be able to see what is upsetting our customer and what next best actions are available to us. Does this make sense? One of the things that you're seeing happen, especially with AI, Ryan, is this like flattening of the organization, right? Because now the systems are in place for us to be able to move away from that rigid hierarchical, I have 7 layers of escalations that I have to go to into a much more flatter team structure that allows for an ecosystem to surround a customer. This is also really hard. Why?
There could be a ton of reasons behind that.
Give me one.
There's not one specific reason.
Give me one specific reason.
Separate systems with no connection.
Yes, separate systems with no connection. Correct. And quite often what happens is, has anyone ever done this? We customers don't make this any easier. Has anyone ever bought a product and in order to get the 20% off new customer discount, you all of a sudden invent a new email? Anyone
Yep.
ever done that? Right?
Uh,
So now, let's be honest, we've all done this. But that creates
Yesterday, Yesterday I did.
Yesterday? Jeffrey, what'd you buy?
I bought some lamps from a company in LA. Yes.
Yep,
Yes.
yep. And so now they're like, well, is it Jeffrey dot Jones or is it just J Jones that I'm talking to? So we don't make this any easier. But the idea is you've got to be able to have a customer master so that you can do this well and so that the right people can have the right understanding of what's going on with the customer at any given time. Spotify does this really well. Amazon is obviously, kind of top of the game of that. We're going to give Amazon some credit a little bit later. Starbucks has also like their loyalty app is doing this really, really well. Again, kind of a simple model if you think about what Delta is doing in terms of their app being able to give information about you to a baggage handler and somebody who's standing above you and, while you order your drink sitting in first class, those of us that get into first class, Ryan, that's the kind of visibility that I'm talking about. Also difficult when we don't have three. And to Logan's point, it's just like you right there, Logan. And it's the idea of the connected tech stack, which by the way, I think 3 or 4 years ago, people used to say, yeah, of course our stuff is connected. And it's not just that it's connected, it's also that it's lean. Now, I'm going to be totally transparent with you. When I was running the team at Salesforce, I used to talk to CEOs and CIOs about this all the time. And then I started my own organization. And let me tell you, this is so much harder for companies who are in a massive growth stage. And so you really can't underestimate how difficult it is when you are growing, because what you're doing is you're picking up applications here, and here to fit a need. This is a major problem for startups and smaller organizations right now because there's an AI solution for everything. Well, only like 60% of those companies are going to be around in 2 years, but now you've banked on it, right? For some portion of your system, and they're not connected. And it is very difficult to focus on a connected tech stack when you're in growth mode. Now, at the enterprise level, that's a different problem, right? In an enterprise, what you're dealing with are, well, we have Slack, but I have been buying it on my Amex for just my team because we're in research and development. The number of times I have heard that, right? And there's a little pocket of this tech, and it's really working lovely, but it's not working for the enterprise, right? That's when you start to see that problem. Now, the other thing I would say is I was just actually advising a startup the other day, and I was like, well, tell me about your back end systems. Like, what are we talking about? All homegrown. Again, makes sense for where they are, but they're about to sign a huge deal that will change their trajectory, and they are going to have that conversation about buy, not build. It is not to say that your tech stack has to be everything. We used to say this quite a bit in Salesforce. It doesn't have to be all Salesforce. There are a lot of products that can be helpful. It just has to be connected and it has to be intentionally connected. And what does it have to be intentionally connected on? Rule number one, right? If you haven't gone through the process of rule number one, which is what systems are we connecting to drive what experience, you're connecting it for the wrong reason. Now, often when I used to give this presentation to the C-suite, this is the slide that IT loves, and you see everybody else kind of zone out, right? The CMO is like, and the sales team is like, this doesn't matter to me. That has to change as quickly as possible. So when you're talking about this with folks, make sure you're including that this isn't an IT problem anymore, right? This is why you're starting to see HR and IT teams start to merge together because they're talking about like how do we reorganize our organization and put in the support system from an IT perspective. Also very difficult. I have a lot of examples for companies that have gone from like 300 applications to 10. Most of that information is proprietary, but I will point out, because I think we have a bunch of Salesforce people here, Slack does this exceptionally well. And this is the reason why Slack was born, right? So Slack has amazing access for a bunch of apps that you hated. So Jeffrey, back to the question you and I were having about a process. Is there anyone here that likes the expense process? Doing expenses?
No.
The
No.
worst. There is
No.
like, it is the worst. It is the bane of a week for the vast majority of workers out there. In Slack, you can connect your expense software, whatever it is. It's usually Concur, which is, don't get me started, but and it's a three-step process, and it's pulling in the information, but you're doing it in the Slack interface. And the ease and efficacy is through the roof for something that has traditionally been really painful. Atlassian is the same way, right? When we think about Jira and their product sets, they are all appropriate for different parts of an organization, but they are all built on the same kind of back end, and they're able to communicate with each other, which enables their cross and upsells. All right. Customer-centric business processes, right data, right role, connected tech stack, very, very difficult. This is the one that gets everybody excited. Anybody talk here or, find themselves in a conversation and someone's like, well, if we just had a data flywheel, right? Everybody loves a data flywheel until somebody has to figure out exactly how difficult it is to build a data flywheel, right? Because who in your organization or the organizations that you're consulting with or talking to is responsible for a data flywheel? Anybody? Who do you think is responsible for that? Is there a team, a department? T, I'm going to call on you. Who's responsible for
Yes.
flywheel in your company?
Who's responsible for the flywheel in our company? I would say Brandon or Ryan. Is that a trick question?
Feels like it from my seat.
It
It feels
is
like
a-
it from my seat, T.
It's a great question because most companies don't have a dedicated team to think about this and exclusively this. In fact, you'll notice that most of the companies that we use as examples are like, I look at this slide and I'm like, well, of course.
Of course they have it.
Right,
Right.
of course.
Right.
But they do something really, really well, which is they create an experience for a customer. They learn something in that experience because they're pulling data from it, and then they're creating another customer, and around they go. Let's talk about that as an example. Amazon, easiest return process of all time, right? The thing that everybody hates doing, returning stuff. There's a reason why Amazon makes that really easy, and it actually has nothing to do with being easy for you. The real reason why Amazon makes their return process so easy is they are gleaning so much data from you in that process that allows them to drive better margins and better innovations for their company. Right? So think about the financial impact for all of the stuff we all return. I mean, sometimes I worry I'm going to single-handedly bankrupt Amazon. But what I know is that every time I return something, there is a team inside Amazon, and they aggregate all of that and they say, hey, like 60% of people are returning this product. We need to have a conversation with the supplier. We need to think about taking it off, or we need to consider making it ourselves. This is why Amazon makes batteries, right? So it's not just that they created a new value stream for their customer, they created a new value stream for their company. Netflix is the same thing. Anybody a big Netflix fan? I almost said the word. I'm going to lose my quiz. All right. So Netflix, listen, like the amount of data that Netflix has on all of us is astounding, right? When Reed Hastings went to a meeting, this is like 10 years ago, 9 years ago now, and he was there with his data scientists, and the data scientists said, hey, we have an idea for you. Now, at the time, Netflix wasn't doing any content creation, right? They were just a platform to show other things. And the data scientist said, our data is showing us something, and we want to take a little bit of a bet. We want to try and see if we can run a little pilot to see if the data that we believe to be true is true. And they asked for $100 million from the CEO. What did they ask for $100 million for? Or, better question, what was made with that $100 million? Stranger Things? Close, but no.
Walking Dead?
That's not even a Netflix show. Is
Is
it?
it not?
I don't think so. Isn't
No,
that
it's
like
not.
A&E?
No, that's
That's A&E. That's
A&E.
A&E. Yeah.
Bridgerton?
Ooh, no.
No, it's
Close
not.
as well. All right, so let's back up for a second. The CEO is in a meeting. The data scientist, not sales, not marketing, not research, is asking for $100 million to do content creation. Now, this is a platform that their whole job is not to do content creation. Why would they get involved when Fox and Disney and Discovery?
Football,
Who?
NFL football.
Nope, nope. Oh, Jason, have you heard me give this speech before? Yes, Jason wins the prize. House of Cards. House of Cards was the first piece of
Oh,
creation, and it completely changed the trajectory of Netflix. But the reason why that got greenlit is because it was built off of data, not a guess. So when we think about that data flywheel and how lovely that must be, but you haven't gone through the first three, you can forget about it. It is so difficult to get that done. If you haven't built it, you need to watch it. Oh, sorry, T, it's House of Cards. Yes, it's House of Cards. But this is incredibly difficult. This means you have to be willing to take on good feedback and bad feedback. This means that you have to act on it. And if you're going to ask for feedback, you better be prepared to do something about it when it's negative. Very, very, very difficult. I'll use the Coke example as my last one because I know we have some Atlanta folks here. So one of the first things that Coke did when they built their machines where you can choose whatever, kind of combination drink you want, everybody as a customer loved that, but it was expensive and it was absolutely worth it. Why? Because the data that was throwing off of that machine was helping Coke save money on the back end. They weren't shipping to places that didn't need anything. They were creating new flavors that were in demand because they could see what the combinations were. The customer was actually doing the research and development for them, and they were then making the decision about whether or not they were going to put it into action. So very, very difficult to do and to do well at scale, and incredibly important. All right. So here's Ryan's lead in. You're all going to ask, what about AI, right? And I'm going to tell you this, the same rules apply, but the stakes are higher. And here's why. Because if you think back when any new technological revolution came around, right? The internet, the mobile phone, even, things like CRM and front office kind of technology, it always starts with IT. It's not always like that right now with AI. Right now, the business is getting pressure. So most enterprise companies right now, most publicly traded enterprise companies have boards that are telling them they must spend between 3 and 5% of their IT budget on IT. Do you guys have any idea how much money that is? It is an astonishing amount. When you assume that most IT companies at the enterprise are spending upwards of $1 billion, that's a ton of money to spend on IT. But the problems and the way that they define the opportunity is very different. I'm not going to run through all of these because you can read the slide afterwards. But if you think about experience as the operating system, for instance, AI has set a new bar that most companies are not really ready to meet. The speed and efficacy with our relationship with AI on a one-to-one basis, an enterprise is just not ready for. IT is sitting there thinking, oh, I just redid all my workflows. I just did this, it feels like, right? And now you're telling me I have to do it again, and I have to do it to incorporate AI, right? So, but the problems are very different. If we think about the connected tech stack and nothing happens with AI unless the data is connected. So all these companies that have been kind of duct taping and dreaming it with their tech stack now find themselves at a significant crossroad. This is an existential problem, as Logan, I'm sure, would agree with me on. Like the idea that you can get through it without your data being at least in some sort of a better scenario is.
I have a lot of viewpoints on AI and AI data wheels, and we could have a long conversation around this because it goes well beyond what you see on this screen. There are 6 steps inside of AI and that data wheel alone, and how you should actually think about AI and the ways that it can actually impact our future.
Yep. It is a lot. And let me tell you, the number one reason for every year that I have ever been doing this, why people in IT struggle with this is it is the exact same thing. Our data is a mess, period. That has not changed. No matter how good the tech is, no matter how good the implementation partners are, the data is the problem. And so while everybody's over here, yay, AI, there is a real problem in the data sets. So my point here is same rules apply, stakes are higher, words will matter, and human experience is going to take on a completely new form, right? If we think about the right data, right role, well, now all of a sudden I don't have let's say a deal desk because AI is doing that for me. Well, now I have to think through what that is going to look like because my organization is much flatter, right? So I don't know, I'm sure you guys have seen the organizational charts with the agents and then have agents on top of the agents that then enroll to a person. That is going to have an incredible impact on the idea of right data, right role. Again, like to Logan's point, this is 75 slides if we really wanted to get into it, but I won't spend everybody's time there. Okay, so the next question that comes out of everybody's mouth to me is, okay, I'm in, like, tell me how we get started. And everybody wants to jump into my team can do this, and we're gonna get the C-suite on board, and we're gonna get the board involved, and I'm gonna tell you that's an amazing place to start. But who's this?
It's Coach K.
Coach K, right? Coach K, the amazing coach of the Blue Devils, right?
Smith was better, but Coach K.
Yeah. 5 fundamentals make every team great: communication, trust, caring, and pride, right? There is no way that the Duke basketball players become great without this man. Just like there is no way that Jeff Bezos or Larry Ellison become great without this guy. Anybody know who this guy is?
Chassis, right?
Mm-mm. This is Bill Campbell. He's the author of The $1 Trillion Coach. And he was kind of the sage for all of the kind of, tech moguls. He passed away a few years ago, but if you haven't read The $1 Trillion Coach, I highly recommend it. And I love this quote because this is the reason why Catalyst exists. This is the reason why my team at Salesforce existed. Tell them what the problem the consumer has, not which features you want. I point this out because you cannot do this work alone. Companies are too tied into their own orthodoxies, into the own way of doing things, into their data sets to be able to do this alone. This is why people like Ryan and Logan and me and Jason exist, because we have a purview to the way things are working and the abilities of other organizations that look nothing like some of your companies, and we can bring that to bear. And when you think about how do we do that, first you imagine what it looks like, then you prioritize which capabilities we're going to do. You must embed the best practices, and this is a step most companies miss every time. There are best practices for how to do this transformation, and they skip right. Sometimes they hit on planning, and then they skip right into executing, right? If you think about where my team spends most of their time, it's on the imagine, prioritize, embed. If you think about where Palladin spends a lot of their time, it's on embed, plan, and execute. You've got to have all muscles represented, and you cannot do it by yourself, which is why people like Ryan and I exist. All right, this is actually my last slide. I'll make an offer. My company has a diagnostic. If you're curious about where your company sits on kind of the spectrum of those 4, there is a spectrum inside of them, just like a Myers-Briggs test, right? You can be a little extroverted, all the way extroverted. We do have a diagnostic that I'm happy to share afterwards. If you want, you can reach out to me. But let me have you guys raise hands, and maybe Elizabeth or Rachel, you guys can help me navigate if anybody has any questions. Too many people stop at the imagine. That's interesting. I actually think too many people don't do the imagine piece.
So many people are dream makers too, right? So just thinking professionally and personally, they can imagine like, oh, imagine what success looks like if we have this, if we have that, or I want this, or I want that. And then when it comes down to prioritizing how you get to that end state, I think that's when the breakdown starts to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that from your world, T, for sure.
So Nicole, I'm gonna leave you to answer the Q&A here because I'm gonna take off to try to catch my last minute flight I had to shift over to. But before I do, I just want to say thank you for the time today and the continued partnership with you and the Catalyst team. Jason, who I know is on here, you guys have just been incredible partners to us. And we're very grateful for having you as an extension of our organization. So thank you for that.
Likewise, fly safe.
Thank you.
Any hard questions, we're going to just offload to Ryan. Okay, I did see a question come in.
Yeah, hey, for me, how long does do the imagine and prioritize efforts usually take here? I'm curious what to position for a customer.
Yeah, I think it depends on the size company that you're talking about, Jeffrey. Can you give me a sense of employee size or revenue?
I'm thinking of a company like Groupon that has something like a couple hundred reps.
The hardest part about the imagine and prioritizing, Jason is, I hope, laughing, is scheduling. Like in theory, you should be able to imagine over a course of 2 to 3 days. Prioritization, I have seen take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, assuming everyone's on board. Both of these play, but like both in the imagine and the prioritize step, Jeffrey, require sometimes uncomfortable conversations about getting people on board. And so if everybody's there and everybody's like on board with it, you can truncate the time. It's the people that muck up the process and elongate the time. But I would say in general, for a size of that company, you could imagine over 2 to 3 days and you could prioritize over a month, let's say. Jason, you think that's fair?
I do, and I think you're right that typically what happens is it's the scheduling that elongates those. Just getting access to the people is often the most problematic thing.
Sure. Hey, thank you.
Yeah. Jason and I just finished a project and it was supposed to be like a month and a half, and it was close to 6, mostly because of scheduling. So, and then, God forbid you have like a holiday involved or something like that. But yes, in the best case. Logan, do you have a question or are you high-fiving me?
No, I have a question for you. So going back to your comment earlier, right, about there's always business and IT. They've always looked at things separately, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've sat on the business, I've sat in IT. So I have a different viewpoint from that perspective that I look at. But how do you get them to understand? Because when you look at it from fixed focus and whatnot, right? In IT, it's always fix, because we built something because the business has asked for something. The business is always asking. It's the speed at which the business moves. IT never understands that. They think that they have to build. Now it's tech stack. IT doesn't build revenue, though. Sales does. Mm-hmm. You need sales to understand, though, how complicated it is from a build aspect. Mm-hmm. And then when you bring AI into the mix, it even complicates it even further.
Yeah. I wish I think Jason's probably reading my mind on this. I wish I had the slide that we just showed a customer the other day and is actually on our LinkedIn that has the iceberg on it, right? Mm-hmm. Which is everybody in the executive team, everybody on the business side is worried about what's happening above the waterline, and everybody in IT cares about what's happening underneath. And part of bringing those two teams together is deeply understanding what both of them are charged with and having some empathy for both of those moments. I think once you establish that empathy, the second piece of that is you have to get them to agree upon a vision together, and you have to get them to co-create together. Like to Jeffrey's question, that imagine step, mm-hmm. I would never, ever step into a room and do an ideation session with just one of those sides. That is a waste, right?
Absolutely.
So, and then when you come out of that and the prioritization piece, the other thing is when you really when you boil it down to it's like, nuclear level, they're going towards the same thing. They're using completely different words. Mm-hmm. Right? So if the team, if business is worried about revenue and speed, and underneath IT is worried about uptime and stability, those two things feed each other, but they don't see that in each other. So part of the job of companies like mine is bringing them together and helping them understand in their own words how those things meld together.
Okay, I got one more question for you.
Yeah.
So from an AI standpoint, because I am going to take it to AI, how do you get through to a client, a customer, they want to use AI, but they need to understand the aspects behind modeling, the compute that it takes to actually train, retrain. What is the model doing? What data it's learning off of? Like what approach do you take in doing all of that? Because I think it is very important when you start touching AI, what is happening with your data?
So is the person that you're talking to in IT or in the business?
I think that they both need to understand is the bad thing.
Yeah. So
Like I think that Salesforce, like I think that they're kind of holding. I hope that they're holding AE speech to the fire. Like when I left, they told everyone they need to become more technical. I think that we are truly transforming into a world that you need to be more technical and really understand how stuff works.
yeah, I don't disagree with you. And I don't think most of Jeffrey, you're here, you tell us. I mean, I think that that shift is happening not just at Salesforce, that's happening at ServiceNow, that's happening at Oracle, always been techie, that's happening at SAP, like that's happening across the board. One of the things that people have to understand is most people have no idea what's going on with AI. Like there's a reason why 95% of them fail because we are in the failure rate phase now. Like that is part of the maturation. I would also say that when you have a customer that is like really bucking you and you feel like you're hitting your head against the wall, one of the ways that we have found really helpful to kind of change the conversation, connect them with someone else who is in a similar role but is seeing successes and let them talk. Because you're banging your head against the wall. You're banging your head against the wall if you just keep saying the same things over and over again. But likewise, you also have to come up with some um, metaphors for how to think about it. So I remember in the early days of Ignite at Salesforce, we used to talk about like, don't worry about what the Lego pieces are. We're going to worry about the Lego pieces. What are, I want you to tell me what car, are we building a Millennium Falcon? Are we building a skyscraper? Like, what are we building about? And then we will worry about the pieces underneath and let you be part of that. But let's understand what we're building first and not start with Lego pieces. It's hard work. I mean, I don't mean to make it so easy.
No, I know it's hard work, so I appreciate it. Like I love hearing like your insights, your thoughts, and how you approach everything. So it's always helpful to me.
Awesome. All right. Well, unless there are no more questions, I'm going to give everybody 4 minutes back in their schedule. This is my information, even my cell phone number, because I am a text-friendly human, and I love it when people shoot me a text. So that's all of my information. Our website is catalyst-innovation.com. Obviously, most of you know palladintech.com, and we're here to help. So let us know how we can, because this is tough. It's a tough job out there, but we're here to help. And thank you all for joining. Really appreciate it.